Welcome back to the channel. Today we are stepping into one of the most heart-pounding and adrenaline-fueled disaster thrillers to come out of Hollywood in recent years. We are talking about Skyscraper, the 2018 action spectacle that put Dwayne Johnson against the deadliest opponent of his entire career, a building. Not a villain, not a monster, not a government agency, but an actual structure of steel and glass that becomes a death trap for everyone trapped inside it. If you love edge-of-your-seat action movies that combine family drama with jaw-dropping stunts, this is a film you need to know everything about. So without wasting any more time, let us break down every single detail of Skyscraper. Overview. Skyscraper is a 2018 American action thriller film written and directed by Rawson Marshall Thurber, the filmmaker behind comedy hits like Dodgeball and We're the Millers, who here makes his first ever venture into a completely serious, non-comedic action film. The movie stars Dwayne Johnson in the leading role, alongside Neve Campbell, Chin Han, Roland Mahler, Noah Taylor, Byron Mann, Pablo Schreiber, and Hannah Quinlivan. At its core, this is a story about a former government agent who must fight his way through a burning skyscraper to save his trapped family, and it has been very openly compared by critics and audiences alike to classics such as Die Hard and The Towering Inferno, both of which clearly inspired its tone and structure. The film is an American production, developed and financed primarily through Legendary Entertainment, with Universal Pictures handling the distribution. The project began life in May of 2016, when Legendary Entertainment won a fierce bidding war among major studios for the rights to a Chinese-set action-adventure script. Dwayne Johnson was attached to play the lead role almost immediately, while Rawson Marshall Thurber came aboard not just as the director but also as the sole writer and one of the producers of the film, working alongside producer Beau Flynn through his Flynn Picture Company and Johnson's own production company, 7 Bucks Productions. This was actually the second time Johnson and Thurber worked together, since they had previously collaborated on the comedy film Central Intelligence in 2016. Although Skyscraper is set in Hong Kong, the actual filming took place primarily in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, where principal photography began in August of 2017 and continued for several months into the autumn of that year. The production team built much of the interior of the fictional skyscraper on sound stages and through extensive studio work in Vancouver, while additional location shooting and exterior photography were captured in Hong Kong itself, particularly around the Hong Kong Cultural Center, which is the real-life location used as the visual basis for where the fictional tower stands in the story. The cinematography for the film was handled by the celebrated cinematographer Robert Elswit, an Academy Award winner known for his work on films like There Will Be Blood, and his expertise brought a genuine sense of scale and vertigo-inducing height to every shot of the towering structure at the center of the story. The skyscraper itself, named the Pearl in the film, was designed with real architectural input from the firm Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill Architecture, who consulted on the production to make sure the fictional 225-story mega-all tower felt like something that could plausibly exist in the real world rather than something purely fantastical. The design of the building drew inspiration from Chinese cultural symbolism, specifically the image of a twisting dragon holding a pearl in its mouth, which is why the building in the film is shaped the way it is and why it carries the name it does. This attention to architectural realism gave the film a grounded visual foundation even as the story itself leaned heavily into larger-than-life action set pieces. Plot details. The story of Skyscraper opens 10 years before its main events, showing us a flashback to a moment that defines everything about its central character. Will Sawyer, played by Dwayne Johnson, is at this point still working as the leader of an FBI hostage rescue team. During an extremely tense hostage situation, Sawyer and his colleague and close friend Ben Gillespie find themselves trying to negotiate with a man who is holding his own son as a human shield. Sawyer believes for a moment that he has successfully talked the man down, but the situation turns into catastrophe when the man reveals he is wearing a suicide bomb vest, which detonates and kills both the father and the child. In the chaos of that explosion, Sawyer loses his left leg from below the knee, a devastating physical and emotional wound that changes the entire trajectory of his life and career. 10 years later, Will Sawyer has rebuilt his life as a private security consultant, fitted with an advanced prosthetic leg that restores nearly all of his physical mobility. On the recommendation of his old friend Ben Gillespie, Sawyer is hired by wealthy Chinese financier and entrepreneur Zhao Longji, played by Chin Han, to conduct the final security review of the tallest building ever constructed, a 225-story mega-all tower in Hong Kong known as the Pearl, standing at an almost unbelievable 3,500 feet in height. The building is structurally complete but has not yet opened to the public, and its uppermost residential floors are still being finalized. Sawyer moves into the building together with his wife Sarah, played by Neve Campbell, a former United States Navy doctor, and their twin children Georgia and Henry, while he carries out his inspection of the tower's safety and security systems. During his review, Sawyer confirms to Zhao and the building's security team, including security director Ajani Okeke and his friend Ben Gillespie, that the computerized fire suppression and security systems appear to be fully functional, though he insists on personally inspecting the off-site security center that controls the entire network remotely. Zhao hands Sawyer a tablet device that grants full administrative access to every system inside the Pearl, an access that can only be unlocked through facial recognition tied specifically to Sawyer's identity. This tablet becomes the single most valuable and dangerous object in the entire story, because whoever controls it controls the fate of everyone inside the building. As Sawyer and Gillespie make their way to the off-site facility, they are ambushed by a hired thief working on behalf of a ruthless international criminal named Corse Bota, played by Roland Mahler. In a shocking twist, Gillespie reveals that he has secretly been working for Bota all along, motivated by jealousy and resentment toward Sawyer. A brutal struggle follows, during which Gillespie is fatally wounded, but before he dies he warns Sawyer that Bota's men will now be hunting him specifically because of the tablet. Bota's subordinate, a cold and highly skilled operative named Xia, played by Hannah Quinlivan, steals the tablet from Sawyer and uses it to infiltrate the off-site security center, killing everyone working there in the process. With administrative control of the building now in criminal hands, Bota and his mercenaries deliberately set a fire on the 96th floor of the skyscraper using a chemical accelerant. This is not a random act of destruction, but a calculated extortion scheme, since Bota had previously blackmailed Zhao for enormous sums of money during the construction of the tower and wants to destroy evidence, specifically a detailed digital file that records every transaction and exposes the criminal syndicates Bota works with. A hacker working with Bota's team uses the stolen tablet to disable the fire extinguishing systems on every floor above the 95th, creating an impenetrable wall of fire that cuts off Sawyer's family, who are staying on the upper residential floors, from any possibility of rescue from below. Meanwhile, the local Hong Kong police, led by Inspector Wu, played by Byron Mann, begin hunting for Sawyer himself, wrongly believing that he is somehow responsible for orchestrating the entire crisis. With his family trapped above a wall of flame and the police closing in on him, Sawyer makes a desperate, and now iconic decision. He climbs a massive construction crane standing beside the unfinished tower next door and leaps from the top of the crane through open air, crashing through a window into the burning skyscraper itself, a sequence that became the defining image used in nearly all of the film's marketing and promotional posters. Inside the building, Zhao and his security chief Okeke attempt to send guards to rescue Sarah and the children, but the rescue team is killed in an explosion that destroys a nearby elevator shaft, forcing Sarah and her children to navigate through smoke and fire toward an upper lobby on their own. Believing that Sawyer's family has perished in the blaze, Zhao and Okeke are convinced by the insurance executive Mr. Pierce, played by Noah Taylor, to evacuate all remaining personnel by helicopter. It is then revealed that Pierce has also been secretly working for Bota the entire time, and the evacuation is exposed as a trap that results in the deaths of nearly everyone except Zhao, who narrowly escapes into his heavily fortified penthouse and locks it down from any intrusion. Sawyer fights his way upward through the burning structure and manages to kill Pierce before Pierce can harm his family, though in the chaos his daughter Georgia becomes separated from her mother and brother. Sawyer makes the agonizing decision to send Sarah and Henry through the wall of fire inside a free-falling elevator, applying the emergency brakes at just the right moment to bring them to safety below the fire line. Sarah immediately works with Inspector Wu to explain the true nature of the conspiracy, and reveals that Bota and his men are planning to escape the building by parachute toward a specific landing zone. With Sarah safely working alongside the police, Sawyer continues his desperate search for Georgia and discovers that Bota has taken her hostage at the very top of the tower, demanding that Sawyer deliver Zhao to him in exchange for the little girl's life. Sawyer is forced to physically scale the exterior of the skyscraper to reach Zhao's penthouse, eventually convincing Zhao to come with him in a plan to outsmart Bota rather than truly surrender him. At the top of the building, inside the building's massive decorative ornament fitted with mirrors and cameras that simulate the feeling of flying above the city, Sawyer and Zhao turn on Bota's remaining men, killing them in a fierce confrontation. Bota injures Zhao and grabs Georgia, threatening to throw her from the building while holding a live grenade, deliberately mirroring the horrific hostage situation that cost Sawyer his leg 10 years earlier. But Sawyer, having learned from that devastating failure, tricks Bota into believing he is standing in front of him when he has actually circled behind him, and with a single decisive strike he saves his daughter and sends Bota falling to his death, killed by his own grenade in midair. On the ground, Sarah locates the stolen tablet that Xia dropped during her own capture by the police, and using what she has learned from Sawyer about rebooting electronic devices, she manages to reboot the Pearl's entire computer system, finally reactivating the fire suppression network and extinguishing the inferno that has consumed dozens of floors of the tower. Sawyer, Georgia, and Zhao are safely brought down by helicopter. The entire Sawyer family is joyfully reunited, and Zhao, surveying the catastrophic fire damage that stretches from the 96th floor all the way to the roof, declares his firm intention to rebuild the Pearl from the ashes. Cast: Dwayne Johnson plays Will Sawyer, the former Marine and FBI hostage rescue team leader turned security consultant whose physical disability from a past tragedy becomes the emotional core of his character, and whose relentless determination to protect his family drives every single action sequence in the film. Neve Campbell plays Sarah Sawyer, Will's wife and a former United States Navy doctor, whose intelligence, composure under pressure, and physical courage make her far more than simply a character waiting to be rescued. Critics widely praised Campbell's performance as one of the genuine highlights of the film, noting that she holds her own in the action sequences just as capably as her co-star. Chin Han plays Zhao Longji, the wealthy Chinese financier and visionary behind the construction of the Pearl, a man whose hidden financial dealings with a criminal organization ultimately put everyone around him in mortal danger, but who redeems himself through genuine courage in the film's climax. Roland Mahler plays Kors Bota, a ruthless Danish criminal mastermind whose extortion scheme against Zhao sets the entire disaster in motion. Mahler brings a cold, controlled menace to the role that anchors the film's villainy. Noah Taylor plays Mr. Pierce, the corrupt insurance executive whose betrayal proves to be one of the film's most significant plot twists, secretly working in service of Bota throughout the entire crisis. Byron Mann plays Inspector Wu, the head of the Hong Kong Police Force Response Team, who initially pursues Sawyer as a suspect before coming to understand the true nature of the conspiracy unfolding inside the tower. Pablo Schreiber plays Ben Gillespie, Sawyer's former FBI colleague and close friend, whose jealousy and greed lead him into a fatal betrayal early in the story. Hannah Quinlivan plays Xia, Bota's highly capable and dangerous henchwoman, responsible for some of the film's most intense confrontations. McKenna Roberts and Noah Cottrell play Georgia and Henry Sawyer, the twin children of Will and Sarah, whose safety becomes the central stake of the entire film. Release date and box office. Skyscraper had its world premiere in Beijing on July 2, 2018, reflecting the film's significant ties to Chinese setting and Chinese box office expectations. It then received its wide theatrical release in the United States on July 13, 2018, distributed by Universal Pictures. The film was produced on a budget of approximately $125 million. At the domestic box office, the film opened to a disappointing $24.9 million, finishing in third place behind stronger competition that weekend, and it went on to earn a total of roughly $68 million across the United States and Canada. Internationally, however, the film performed far more strongly, particularly in China, where it debuted at the top of the box office chart, ultimately contributing to a worldwide international total of well over $236 million. Combined, Skyscraper grossed approximately $304 million worldwide, comfortably surpassing its production budget and ranking among the more commercially successful action films of that summer, even though the underwhelming domestic performance led some industry analysts to suggest that audiences may have grown slightly fatigued with the frequency of Dwayne Johnson's film releases around that period. Trailer and tone. The official trailers for Skyscraper, released by Universal in February and again in May of 2018, leaned heavily into the film's most visually arresting image, which is Dwayne Johnson leaping from the top of a construction crane onto the side of the burning Pearl Tower. This single image became the centerpiece of nearly every poster and promotional campaign for the film, and the marketing team even created deliberate homage posters referencing the classic imagery of the towering inferno and Die Hard, openly acknowledging the films that inspired this one. The tone established by the trailers promised a relentless, high-adrenaline thriller built around vertigo-inducing heights, raging fire, and a father's desperate fight to reach his trapped family, and the finished film delivered exactly that experience, blending large-scale disaster movie spectacle with the kind of personal, character-driven stakes that have defined the most memorable entries in this genre. Final thoughts. Skyscraper may not reinvent the action genre, and critics were quick to point out its obvious debts to earlier classics, but what it delivers is exactly what it promises: a relentless, visually spectacular thrill ride anchored by genuine emotional stakes and powered by a cast that fully commits to the absurd heights, both literal and dramatic, that the story demands. Dwayne Johnson once again proves why he remains one of the most reliable action stars in the world, and Neve Campbell's performance reminds audiences why she has always been far more than a scream queen. Whether you watch it for the dizzying stunts, the blazing visual effects, or simply the satisfaction of watching a family fight its way back together against impossible odds, Skyscraper remains one of the most purely entertaining disaster thrillers of its era. The Complete Story of Skyscraper, 2018. Part 1. The Tragedy That Shaped a Man. To understand who Will Sawyer is by the time the main events of Skyscraper unfold, you first have to go back 10 years before the story really begins, to a single afternoon that destroyed one part of his life and built another part of it in its place. At that time, Sawyer is not yet a security consultant living a quiet domestic life with a wife and twin children. He is the leader of an FBI hostage rescue team, a man trained to walk into the most dangerous and unpredictable situations imaginable and bring everyone out alive. He works closely alongside a trusted colleague named Ben Gillespie, a man he considers not just a partner but a genuine friend, someone he trusts with his life because that is precisely what the job demands of the people who do it. On this particular day, Sawyer's team responds to a hostage situation that initially looks survivable, the kind of crisis that men like him have talked down 100 times before. A distressed and desperate father is holding his own young son as a human shield, and Sawyer, using every ounce of his training and his natural gift for reading people in crisis, attempts to calm the situation through negotiation. For a brief, hopeful moment, it actually seems to be working. The father appears to soften. He appears to be listening. He lowers his guard just enough that Sawyer allows himself to believe that this will end the way it is supposed to end, with the child safe and the father in custody rather than in a body bag. Then everything collapses in an instant. The father is not simply distressed. He is wearing a suicide vest beneath his clothing, and in a moment of horrifying finality, he detonates it, killing himself and his own son in front of the team that came to save them. The force of the explosion tears through Sawyer's body, and when the smoke clears and the chaos settles, he discovers that he has lost his left leg from below the knee. It is a wound that will reshape every single day of the rest of his life, a permanent physical reminder of a moment he could not control and a tragedy he could not prevent no matter how skilled or well-trained he was. This single failure, more than any villain or any criminal organization he will ever face afterward, becomes the deepest psychological wound carried by the man at the center of this story. Part 2. A new life built on a new foundation. 10 years pass. Will Sawyer has rebuilt himself, quite literally, fitted with an advanced modern prosthetic leg that restores nearly all of his original mobility, and allows him to move, climb, and fight with a physical capability that belies what he lost. He has left behind the FBI and built a new career as a private security consultant, someone hired by wealthy clients and major corporations to assess the safety of high-value buildings and properties. He has also built a family, marrying Sarah, a former United States Navy doctor whose own steady competence under pressure will prove to be just as important to this story as anything her husband does. Together they have twin children, Georgia and Henry, and by every outward appearance, Sawyer has found a version of peace and stability that once seemed impossible in the aftermath of what happened to him. It is through the recommendation of his old friend Ben Gillespie that Sawyer receives what looks like the opportunity of a lifetime, a contract to conduct the final and most important security review of an extraordinary new construction project in Hong Kong. The building is called the Pearl, and it is not simply tall. It is the tallest structure ever built by human hands at that point, rising 3,500 feet into the sky across 225 stories, a feat of engineering so audacious that it has been designed in the shape of a twisting dragon holding a pearl in its mouth, a deliberate tribute to Chinese cultural symbolism built into the very architecture of the tower. The building has been financed and brought into existence by Zhao Longji, a brilliant and wealthy Chinese entrepreneur whose vision and fortune have been poured entirely into this single, history-making project. Sawyer travels to Hong Kong with his entire family, since the contract requires him to move into the building's residential floors while he completes his inspection. For Sawyer and Sarah and their children, this becomes something between a working assignment and an extraordinary family adventure, living temporarily inside the tallest building in the world, surrounded by technology and engineering that feels almost like science fiction made real. Sawyer meets with Zhao directly, along with the building's security director Ajani Okeke, his old friend Ben Gillespie, and an insurance executive named Mr. Pierce, to deliver his preliminary assessment. He confirms that the building's computerized fire suppression and security systems appear to be functioning exactly as designed, but as a careful and thorough professional, he insists on personally inspecting the off-site security center, the remote facility from which the entire building's systems can be monitored and controlled. Before he leaves for that final inspection, Zhao hands Sawyer a tablet device of extraordinary importance. This single tablet grants complete administrative control over every system inside the Pearl, from the elevators to the fire suppression network to the security cameras covering every floor, and it can only be unlocked through facial recognition tied specifically to Sawyer himself. It is, in effect, the master key to the safety of everyone living and working inside the tower, and the fact that it exists at all, concentrated into one single portable device, will turn out to be both the building's greatest technological achievement and its single greatest vulnerability. Part 3. Betrayal from Within. As Sawyer and Ben Gillespie travel together toward the off-site security facility, they are suddenly ambushed. A hired thief, working secretly on behalf of an international criminal mastermind named Course Bota, attempts to steal the tablet by force. In the chaos and violence of the ambush, something far worse than a simple robbery is revealed. Ben Gillespie, the man Sawyer has trusted as a friend and colleague for years, turns against him. Driven by jealousy and a deep, festering resentment that Sawyer never suspected, Gillespie has secretly been working for Bota all along, and in this moment he chooses his criminal allegiance over his friendship. A brutal physical struggle erupts between the two men, and in the end it is Gillespie who falls, mortally wounded in the fight. But even as he dies, he offers Sawyer one final piece of information delivered not out of kindness but out of grim honesty, warning him that Bota's men will now hunt Sawyer specifically because of the tablet he still carries. It is a betrayal layered with tragedy, the discovery that the man Sawyer trusted most outside his own family had been secretly working against him the entire time, and it sets the stage for everything that follows. Bota's chief operative, a cold and exceptionally dangerous woman named Xia, succeeds where the hired thief failed. She steals the tablet directly from Sawyer in the aftermath of the struggle and uses it to infiltrate the off-site security facility itself, killing every single person working inside it to eliminate any possibility of resistance or warning. With the tablet now firmly in criminal hands, the true scale of Bota's plan begins to reveal itself. This was never simply about theft. It is about extortion, about silencing evidence, and about using the world's most advanced skyscraper as the stage for an act of devastating violence. Part 4: Fire at the 96th Floor. Bota's true motivation, it turns out, stretches back through the entire history of the building's construction. During the massive, multi-billion-dollar project to build the Pearl, Bota had extorted enormous sums of money from Zhao Longji, and Zhao, rather than simply paying and forgetting, kept a meticulous digital record of every transaction, a file that documents not only the payments themselves but the identities and operations of 3 separate criminal syndicates connected to Bota. That file represents Bota's single greatest vulnerability, and he is determined to destroy it along with anyone who might use it against him, even if that means burning down the very building he extorted money to help finance. Using the stolen tablet, Bota's men deliberately ignite a fire on the 96th floor of the tower, using a chemical accelerant specifically chosen to overwhelm the building's defenses. This single act triggers the skyscraper's advanced computer-controlled fire suppression system, but Bota's hacker, working through the stolen tablet, immediately disables every fire extinguishing system above the 95th floor. The effect of this sabotage is catastrophic and precisely calculated. It creates an impenetrable wall of fire, a literal barrier of flame that separates the lower portion of the building, where rescue operations could otherwise be mounted, from the upper floors, where Sawyer's wife and children remain trapped in their residence, completely cut off from any help from below. As the fire spreads and the building's residents and staff descend into panic, the local Hong Kong police force, led by the disciplined and methodical Inspector Wu, begins searching for Sawyer himself, mistakenly believing that he is somehow connected to the unfolding disaster. Sawyer now finds himself in an impossible position, hunted by the very authorities who should be helping him, while his family sits trapped above an inferno that grows more dangerous by the minute, and while the men responsible for the entire catastrophe close and around him with the stolen access to every system in the building. Part 5: The Leap That Became Legendary. Knowing that his family is trapped on the floors directly above the fire, and that every passing minute brings them closer to death, Sawyer makes a decision that defies both logic and self-preservation. Spotting a massive construction crane standing beside an unfinished building adjacent to the Pearl, he climbs to its highest point, far above the streets of Hong Kong, and without hesitation, launches himself off the crane and through open air toward the side of the burning skyscraper itself. It is one of the most visually audacious moments in the entire film, the image that came to define every poster and trailer released to promote it. A single man with a prosthetic leg leaping across an impossible gap with absolutely nothing beneath him, but a fatal fall if he misjudges the distance by even a few feet. He survives the leap, crashing through a window and into the building itself, finally gaining access to the tower above the fire line where his family remains trapped, and in doing so he also escapes the police pursuit that had been closing in on him at ground level. It is a moment that crystallizes everything the film has been building toward, the transformation of a man defined by his greatest failure 10 years earlier into someone willing to risk absolutely everything, including his own life, for the chance to reach the people he loves most. Part 6. The Family Divided by Fire. Inside the burning tower, Zhao and his security director Okeke attempt to organize a rescue for Sawyer's trapped family, sending guards up toward the residential floors where Sarah and the children are sheltering. But Bota's men have laid explosive traps throughout the building, and the rescue attempt ends in disaster when an explosion destroys a nearby elevator shaft, killing the rescuers and forcing Sarah, Georgia, and Henry to navigate through smoke-filled corridors and active flames entirely on their own, with no help coming from anywhere. Believing, based on the destroyed elevator and the silence from above, that Sawyer's entire family has perished in the fire, Zhao and Okeke are persuaded by the insurance executive Mr. Pierce to abandon the building entirely and evacuate the remaining personnel by helicopter. It is at this exact moment that one of the film's most devastating twists is revealed. Pierce, the man Zhao trusted to advise him through the crisis, has been working for Bota from the very beginning, and the evacuation he so urgently recommended turns out to be nothing more than a trap, resulting in the deaths of nearly everyone involved except Zhao himself, who manages to escape into his fortified penthouse and seal it from intrusion just in time. Sawyer, fighting his way through the building floor by floor, finally locates his family and manages to kill Pierce before the corrupt executive can do any further harm. But in the chaos of the confrontation, his daughter Georgia becomes separated from her mother and brother, swallowed up into a different part of the burning tower. With the fire spreading relentlessly and time running out, Sawyer makes an agonizing tactical decision. He places Sarah and Henry inside an elevator and sends them into a controlled free fall straight down through the wall of fire that has been blocking every previous rescue attempt, applying the emergency brakes at precisely the right moment to bring them safely down below the fire line, a maneuver that requires perfect timing and complete trust between husband and wife. Once safely on the ground, Sarah does not simply wait for help. She immediately finds Inspector Wu and explains everything, revealing the true nature of the conspiracy, exposing Bota as the true mastermind behind the entire catastrophe, and warning the police that Bota and his remaining men are planning to escape the area by parachute toward a specific landing zone once their plan is complete. Part 7. The Father, the Daughter, and the Top of the World. With Sarah now safely working alongside the police to dismantle Bota's escape plan, Sawyer continues his desperate search through the upper levels of the tower for his missing daughter. He discovers that Georgia has been captured by Bota himself, who is holding her at the absolute top of the skyscraper, inside a remarkable architectural feature built into the building's crowning ornament, a space lined with mirrors and cameras specifically designed to create the illusion of flying high above the city. Bota delivers his demand with brutal simplicity. He wants Chow delivered to him in exchange for George's life. Sawyer is forced to physically scale the exterior of the building, climbing along the outside of the tower itself far above the streets of Hong Kong, in order to reach Chow's sealed penthouse and convince him to come along on a plan that involves appearing to surrender him to Bota while secretly preparing to fight back. Together, Sawyer and Zhao ascend to the top of the tower and confront Bota and his remaining men directly. In the fierce battle that follows, Zhao deliberately creates a distraction that allows both himself and Sawyer to turn the tables, killing Bota's remaining mercenaries in the ornament at the top of the world's tallest building. But Bota himself is far from finished. He injures Zhao and seizes Georgia, holding her at the edge of the building while clutching a live grenade, deliberately recreating the exact horror of the hostage situation that cost Sawyer his leg a decade earlier. A father's worst nightmare staged once again with his own child's life on the line. This time, however, Sawyer has learned from what he lost. Using deception and the element of surprise, he tricks Bota into believing he is standing directly in front of him, when he has actually circled around behind him, and with a single precisely timed strike, he saves his daughter and sends Bota falling from the building, killed instantly by the explosion of his own grenade as he plummets toward the ground. Part 8. The fire goes out. Even with Bota dead and Georgia safe in her father's arms, the crisis is not entirely over. Fire still rages through dozens of floors of the Pearl beneath them, and Sawyer and Georgia remain trapped at the very top of a building that is, in every meaningful sense, still burning out of control. On the ground, Sarah locates the tablet that Bota's operative CI dropped after being subdued by the police during the confrontation at the planned escape zone. Drawing on something her husband had taught her earlier in the story about rebooting electronic devices when they malfunction, Sarah uses the recovered tablet to reboot the entirety of the Pearl's central computer system, a single decisive action that overrides the sabotage and finally reactivates the building's fire suppression network across every floor, extinguishing the inferno that has consumed so much of the tower. With the fire finally under control, Will Sawyer, his daughter Georgia, and Zhao Longji are all brought down safely from the top of the building by helicopter, descending from what had become one of the most dangerous places on Earth to the relative safety of the ground below. The entire Sawyer family is reunited at last, Sarah, Will, Georgia, and Henry standing together, having survived a catastrophe that very nearly tore them apart forever. Inspector Wu, who had spent much of the crisis pursuing Sawyer as a suspect, finally acknowledges the truth of what really happened and greets him not as a criminal but as the man who saved everyone he possibly could. Zhao, looking up at his magnificent creation now scarred by fire damage stretching from the 96th floor all the way to the very top, declares with quiet determination that he intends to rebuild the Pearl from the ashes, a final note of resilience that closes out the story. That is the complete story of Skyscraper, a film about a father whose greatest failure became the foundation of his greatest strength, and about a family that proved, floor by floor and flame by flame, that no height and no fire could ever be greater than their will to survive together. Here is the complete life history of all the major actors from Skyscraper, 2018. Dwayne Johnson. Dwayne Douglas Johnson was born on May 2, 1972, in Hayward, California, into a family with deep roots in the world of professional wrestling. His father, Rocky Johnson, born Wade Douglas Bowles, was a black Nova Scotian wrestler who became one of the first African-American World Tag Team Champions in the history of professional wrestling, while his mother, Ada Johnson, is of Samoan descent, the daughter of the legendary wrestler High Chief Peter Maivia. Growing up the son and grandson of professional wrestlers meant that young Dwayne spent much of his childhood on the move, traveling with his family to wherever his father's career took them. He lived in numerous states across America during his early years, attended a school in Auckland, New Zealand for a period while staying with his mother's family, and eventually settled for a time in Honolulu, Hawaii, before his father's work brought the family to Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where Dwayne spent his high school years. This constant relocation made academic life difficult for him, and by his own admission he struggled significantly in school during these years. What gave him stability and purpose was athletics, and he proved to be an exceptionally gifted football player, eventually earning a full athletic scholarship to play defensive tackle for the University of Miami, where he became part of the storied 1991 national championship team, though he spent much of his time there as a backup player behind future NFL star Warren Sapp. After his college career ended, Johnson attempted to pursue professional football, but a back injury derailed his chances of making it into the NFL. He signed briefly with the Canadian Football League, playing for the Calgary Stampeders, but left after less than a single season when the path forward in football no longer seemed viable. With football no longer an option, Johnson turned to the family business that had shaped his entire childhood, professional wrestling. He made his debut with the World Wrestling Federation in 1996 under the name Rocky Maivia, a tribute combining the names of both his father and his grandfather. His initial run as a clean-cut good guy character did not resonate with audiences, and the WWF made the pivotal decision to transform him into the brash, charismatic, and endlessly quotable character known as The Rock. This reinvention proved to be one of the most successful character transformations in wrestling history. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, during what fans and historians now call the Attitude Era, The Rock became one of the most popular and bankable performers the sport had ever produced, captivating audiences with his physical gifts, his comedic timing, and his now legendary catchphrases. He won the WWF Championship on multiple occasions and built feuds with other major stars of the era that are still remembered as some of the greatest in wrestling history. It was his immense charisma and his gift for engaging directly with a crowd that eventually caught the attention of Hollywood. Johnson hosted Saturday Night Live in 2000 while still actively wrestling, and the success of that appearance opened the door to film offers. His first significant screen role came as the villain Matthias, also known as the Scorpion King, in The Mummy Returns in 2001, a performance that led directly to him headlining his own spin-off film, The Scorpion King, in 2002, for which his salary set a Guinness World Record at the time for the highest payment ever given to an actor receiving top billing for the first time in a major film. In 2004, Johnson made the decisive choice to leave wrestling behind and commit himself fully to an acting career, a transition that many athletes attempt but few manage successfully. The years that followed saw Johnson build one of the most consistently bankable careers in modern Hollywood. He starred in a wide range of films including Walking Tall, Be Cool, Gridiron Gang, and the family-friendly hit The Game Plan, gradually proving that he could carry films well beyond simple action vehicles. His involvement in the Fast and the Furious franchise, beginning with Fast 5 in 2011 and continuing through several sequels, turned him into one of the most globally recognized faces in the industry, and his work in films such as San Andreas, Central Intelligence, Jumanji, and Disney's Moana further cemented his position as one of the most versatile and reliable stars working anywhere in the world. In 2018, the same year that Skyscraper was released, Johnson also starred in Rampage, continuing an extraordinarily productive period in his career. Alongside his acting, Johnson co-founded Seven Bucks Productions with his former wife and longtime business partner Danny Garcia, a company that has allowed him significant creative and financial control over many of his biggest projects, including Skyscraper itself. Johnson married Danny Garcia in 1997, and the couple share a daughter, Simone Alexander Johnson, born in 2001. Who has since gone on to become a professional wrestler in her own right. Johnson and Garcia divorced in 2008 but have remained close professional collaborators ever since. He later married singer and songwriter Lauren Hashian in 2019, with whom he shares 2 more daughters. Beyond his film and business ventures, Johnson has remained active in philanthropy, founding a charitable foundation dedicated to supporting terminally ill and at-risk children, and he has continued to make occasional returns to the wrestling ring throughout his film career, maintaining a connection to the sport that first made him a household name. Neve Campbell. Neve Adrienne Campbell was born on October 3, 1973, in Guelph, Ontario, in Canada, to a Dutch-born mother named Marnie, who worked as a psychologist and yoga instructor, and a Scottish-born father named Jerry, who worked as a teacher. Long before she ever considered acting, Campbell's first great passion was dance. Inspired by watching a performance of The Nutcracker as a young child, she began training seriously in ballet and was eventually accepted into the prestigious National Ballet School of Canada, where she lived in residence and trained intensively from around the age of 9. She has described her years at the ballet school as some of the most difficult of her entire life, citing the extreme competitiveness and pressure placed on children in that environment. After years of accumulating dance-related injuries, she made the decision around the age of 14 or 15 to leave the ballet world behind and shift her creative energy toward acting instead. Her earliest work in front of a camera came through television commercials for major brands, and she gradually built a foundation in Canadian television, appearing in shows such as Catwalk, in which she played a keyboardist in a pop band, as well as guest spots on various Canadian productions. In 1994, Campbell traveled to Los Angeles in search of representation and ended up auditioning for a role that would change the course of her career, the part of orphan teenager Julia Salinger on the new Fox drama series Party of Five. She won the role, relocated permanently to the United States, and the series went on to become both a critical and commercial success, eventually winning the Golden Globe Award for Best Drama. Campbell's performance was widely praised, with critics frequently describing her as one of the most believable teenage performers on television at the time. While still filming Party of Five, Campbell began building a film career on the side, and her first major theatrical release came with the surprise hit supernatural film The Craft in 1996, a movie that performed far beyond expectations at the box office. Her work in that film caught the attention of director Wes Craven, who was casting his upcoming horror film Scream and specifically sought Campbell out for the lead role of Sidney Prescott, believing she had the right combination of innocence and inner toughness the character demanded. Scream became a massive cultural phenomenon upon its release in 1996, redefining the slasher genre for an entire generation and launching a franchise that would span decades. Campbell reprised the role of Sidney Prescott in 3 immediate sequels throughout the late 1990s and 2000s, and her performances in the franchise have remained closely associated with her name throughout her entire career, eventually returning to the role again in later installments released decades after the original. In the year 2000, having spent 6 demanding seasons balancing television and film work simultaneously, Campbell made the decision not to renew her contract for Party of Five, choosing instead to focus entirely on her film career, a decision that ultimately led to the series concluding its run that same year. She went on to take roles in a wide variety of films that intentionally avoided typecasting her purely as a horror performer, including the psychological thriller Wild Things in 1998, the historical drama 54, and the ballet drama The Company in 2003, a passion project that she also helped produce and write, drawing directly on her own background as a trained dancer. She also built a significant career on the stage, making her West End theatrical debut in London and continuing to perform in theatre productions throughout her career, an art form she has frequently cited as deeply important to her as a performer. In the years leading up to Skyscraper, Campbell built an impressive body of television work, including a recurring role on the political thriller series House of Cards, in which she played the formidable political operative Leanne Harvey. Her casting in Skyscraper as Sarah Sawyer, opposite Dwayne Johnson, brought her back into the action genre in a leading role that critics specifically praised, noting that her performance brought genuine intelligence and physical capability to a character who refused to be reduced to a simple damsel in distress. Campbell has been married twice, first to Canadian actor Jeff Colt in the mid-1990s, and later to British actor John Light, and she has remained one of the most consistently respected and enduring performers to emerge from the 1990s teen drama and horror boom. Chin Han. Ng Chin Han, professionally known simply as Chin Han, was born on November 27, 1969, in Singapore, and built a career that has stretched across more than 3 decades and multiple continents. He began acting as a teenager on stage, performing in classical productions including works by Molière and Shakespeare, and his early training in Tai Chi from his father later proved unexpectedly useful in some of his most physically demanding screen roles. His breakthrough in Singaporean television came in 1994 when he was cast in a leading role in Masters of the Sea, the very first full-length English-language drama series ever produced in Singapore, a landmark moment for the country's television industry. He followed this with the sequel series In Troubled Waters and continued to build his reputation as one of Singapore's most respected screen performers throughout the 1990s. In 1998, Chin Han made his American film debut in a leading role in the independent film Blindness, opposite Vivian Wu, marking his first tentative steps toward an international career. Rather than immediately pursuing Hollywood full-time, however, he chose to step back from acting for a period and moved into directing and producing, working extensively in theater and helming acclaimed Asian productions of plays such as David Hare's The Blue Room, as well as co-producing a musical adaptation of Ang Lee's celebrated film The Wedding Banquet. This period behind the camera lasted for roughly 8 years before he made a deliberate decision to return to acting and pursue opportunities in Hollywood more seriously. His return to the screen began with a role in the 2005 Canadian drama Three Needles, and his career gained significant momentum in 2008 when he was cast as the corrupt mob accountant Lau in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight, a role that introduced him to a vastly larger international audience and opened the door to a steady stream of Hollywood offers. He went on to appear in the disaster epic 2012 and 2009, the star-studded pandemic thriller Contagion in 2011 alongside Matt Damon and Kate Winslet, and a small but memorable role as Councilman Yen in Captain America: The Winter Soldier in 2014. That same broadening of his profile led to one of his most celebrated performances, playing the villainous Chancellor Jiao Sadeo in the lavish Netflix historical epic Marco Polo, a role that required him to master an intricate martial arts fighting style that reportedly took him 5 months and over 300 hours of training to perfect. Chin Han continued to build a remarkably international resume throughout the years that followed, appearing in Independence Day, Resurgence as Commander Jiang, and in Ghost in the Shell alongside Scarlett Johansson, while also maintaining a presence in television through recurring roles on shows including Arrow, The Blacklist, and Last Resort. His casting as the wealthy entrepreneur Zhao Longji in Skyscraper allowed him to anchor a major Hollywood blockbuster as one of its central characters, a role made even more significant by the fact that the production was deliberately built around a story set in the Chinese market with a Singaporean actor at the heart of its narrative. In the years following Skyscraper, Chin Han continued his prolific run with roles in Mortal Kombat, playing the iconic villain Shang Tsung, and in the Disney Plus series American-Born Chinese, further establishing himself as one of the most enduring and globally recognized Asian actors working in both American and Asian cinema today. Roland Mahler. Roland Mahler was born on May 28, 1972, in Odense, Denmark, and his journey to becoming one of his country's most respected actors is one of the most genuinely unusual and hard-fought paths in modern cinema. Far from any conventional training ground, Mahler spent much of his youth deeply entangled in a criminal environment in Odense, accumulating 10 separate assault convictions over the years and ultimately serving a combined total of 4.5 years in prison as a consequence of his actions. It was only in 2002, when he was released on parole under the specific condition that he leave Odense entirely and start his life elsewhere, that the path toward a completely different future began to open up for him. After his release, Mahler enrolled at Den Rytmisk Højskole, a Danish folk high school focused on music, and eventually relocated to Copenhagen, where he found work as a songwriter, collaborating closely with the well-known Danish rapper Jokeren. It was through this entirely unplanned route into the creative world that acting eventually found him rather than the other way around. In 2010, filmmakers Tobias Lindholm and Michael Noah were preparing the prison drama R, a film set inside Horsens State Prison, the very facility where Mahler himself had once been incarcerated. He was initially brought onto the production purely as a consultant, someone who could offer the filmmakers authentic insight into the realities of life behind bars, but the directors were struck by his presence and offered him an acting role in the film instead. His performance as a hardened, high-ranking inmate earned him immediate recognition, including a nomination for Best Supporting Actor at Denmark's prestigious Bodil Awards. This unexpected debut launched a rapid and impressive rise through Danish cinema. Mahler continued his collaboration with director Tobias Lindholm in the tense 2012 thriller A Hijacking, playing a ship's engineer taken hostage by Somali pirates, a role that earned him another Bottle nomination. The following year, in Michael Norris Northwest, he played a local gang member who draws a younger character into a world of crime, and this performance finally won him the Bottle Award outright for Best Supporting Actor. His first true leading role came in 2015 with the acclaimed World War II drama Land of Mine, in which he portrayed a Danish sergeant overseeing a group of young German prisoners of war forced to clear landmines along the Danish coastline in the immediate aftermath of the war. The performance was a sensation, earning him the Bottle Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role, and the film itself went on to receive a nomination for the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. Land of Mine served as Mahler's launching pad into international and English-language cinema. In 2017, the same remarkable year, he appeared in the spy thriller Atomic Blonde alongside Charlize Theron, and in the prison escape remake Papillon, before being cast as the menacing terrorist mastermind Kors Bota in Skyscraper. Notably, while traveling to the United States to promote Land of Mine during the awards season, Mahler was detained for several hours at Los Angeles International Airport by customs officials due to his past criminal record, an incident that highlighted just how far he had traveled from the life he once led, even as the shadows of that earlier life occasionally still followed him. He went on to appear in further notable projects including The Commuter alongside Liam Neeson, the dark comedy Riders of Justice alongside Mads Mikkelsen, and the historical miniseries The North Water. Beyond acting, Mahler has remained deeply engaged with his community in Denmark, working as a mentor to at-risk youth who find themselves on a path similar to the one he once walked, using his own transformation as proof that a different future is always possible. Noah Taylor. Noah George Taylor was born on September 4, 1969, in London, England, to Australian parents Maggie, a journalist and book editor, and Paul, a copywriter and journalist. When Taylor was 5 years old, his family relocated back to Australia, and he spent the remainder of his childhood growing up in the suburbs of Melbourne, including the neighbourhoods of Clifton Hill and Street Kilda. His parents divorced when he was 14, and at 16 Taylor left both school and home without any particular plan or ambition to become an actor. It was almost by accident that performing entered his life, when a friend suggested he try theater simply as something interesting to do on weekends. He found the experience at St. Martin's Youth Arts Centre so unexpectedly fulfilling that he committed himself to pursuing it seriously. His breakthrough came remarkably early, when he was cast at just 17 years old in the lead role of the 1987 coming-of-age drama The Year My Voice Broke, a performance that earned him immediate critical acclaim in Australia. He reprised the same character in the 1991 sequel Flirting, appearing alongside a young Nicole Kidman, and these early performances established him as one of Australian cinema's most promising young talents, someone able to convey emotionally complex and vulnerable characters with remarkable authenticity. His true international breakthrough, however, came in 1996, when he was cast as the teenage version of the troubled piano prodigy David Helfgott in the acclaimed biographical drama Shine, working alongside Geoffrey Rush, who played the older version of the same character. The film received widespread critical recognition, earning multiple Academy Award nominations, and Taylor's raw and unguarded performance in the earlier portions of the story was singled out by many critics as one of the most affecting elements of the entire film. Following Shine, Taylor began building a body of work in American and international cinema that consistently leaned toward unusual, eccentric, and emotionally textured characters rather than conventional leading man roles. He worked twice with director Cameron Crowe, first as the hapless tour manager in Almost Famous in 2000, and then in a smaller but memorable role in the psychological thriller Vanilla Sky in 2001. That same period saw him appear as Bryce, the sidekick to Angelina Jolie's title character in Lara Croft, Tomb Raider and its sequel, demonstrating his ability to move comfortably between intimate independent dramas and large-scale studio blockbusters. In 2002, he took on one of his most unusual and challenging roles, portraying a young Adolf Hitler in the speculative historical drama Max, a film that imagined an alternate path for Hitler as a struggling artist rather than a future dictator, a role he would later revisit in a different capacity on the supernatural television series Preacher. Taylor continued to build an eclectic filmography throughout the 2000s and 2010s, appearing in Tim Burton's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory as Mr. Bucket, Wes Anderson's The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, the post-apocalyptic drama The Road alongside Viggo Mortensen, and Roman Polanski's political thriller The Ghost Rider. His television career grew significantly with his portrayal of the ruthless mercenary Locke on the HBO fantasy epic Game of Thrones, and later as the gangster Darby Sabini on the acclaimed BBC series Peaky Blinders, both of which introduced him to enormous new audiences who may not have been familiar with his earlier independent film work. His casting as the corrupt insurance executive Mr. Pierce in Skyscraper allowed him to bring his particular gift for quiet, unsettling menace to a major studio blockbuster. Beyond acting, Taylor has maintained a lifelong parallel career as a musician and visual artist, having played in several bands over the decades and exhibited his paintings and drawings, reflecting an artistic restlessness that has defined his entire creative life. He married Australian fashion designer Diane Harris in 2012 and currently lives in Brighton, in the south of England. Byron Mann. Byron Mann Fung, professionally known as Byron Mann, was born on August 13, 1967, in Hong Kong, to a Chinese-American mother and a Chinese father, and was raised bilingual in both English and Cantonese in the Kowloon district of the city. He attended the well-regarded Diocesan Boys' School in Hong Kong, where he became actively involved in community theater both as a performer and as a writer, an early indication of the creative path he would eventually pursue. Before acting ever entered the picture, however, Mann was a genuinely accomplished athlete, ranking among the top junior tennis players in Hong Kong in the under-16 age division, a passion for sports shared by his entire family, including a brother who later represented Hong Kong on its Davis Cup tennis team. After completing his secondary education, Mann moved to the United States to continue his studies, eventually earning a degree in philosophy from UCLA in Los Angeles. Following his graduation, he enrolled at USC Law School with every intention of pursuing a legal career, but after his first year of law school, he decided to take a sabbatical and travel back to Hong Kong to explore the possibility of acting instead. He began with relatively modest work in commercials and music videos before landing a role in an NBC television movie, an experience that convinced him to pursue performing seriously rather than return immediately to his legal studies. He nonetheless went back to Los Angeles to complete his law degree and even passed the California bar examination, giving him a genuine fallback profession, before ultimately committing himself fully to acting. Mann's breakthrough film role came in 1994 when he was cast as the iconic martial artist Ryu in the live-action adaptation of Street Fighter, a role that required him to learn martial arts specifically for the production despite having no prior training in the discipline, drawing instead on the athleticism and discipline he had developed through his years as a competitive tennis player. He continued building his career throughout the 1990s and 2000s with roles in films including Red Corner and The Corruptor, while also appearing in numerous American television series. His career found a particularly strong footing in television during the 2010s, with a memorable arc as Yao Fei on the CW series Arrow, a recurring role as Chang on the AMC Western drama Hell on Wheels, and an acclaimed supporting performance as the villainous Silver Lion in The Man with the Iron Fists. In 2015, Mann delivered one of the most widely praised performances of his career, playing the morally compromised mortgage broker Wing Chao in the acclaimed financial drama The Big Short, a role that brought him significant new attention within the American film industry. He continued expanding his television presence with a role as Admiral Augusto Nguyen on the science fiction series The Expanse, and went on to headline the Netflix martial arts series Wu Assassins as the powerful crime figure known as Uncle Six. His casting as Inspector Wu in Skyscraper allowed him to bring his fluency in both English and Cantonese to a role set explicitly within the Hong Kong setting of the film, lending the production an additional layer of cultural authenticity. Mann remains one of the most prolific and respected Asian actors working between Hollywood and Asian cinema, continuing to build a filmography that spans both action blockbusters and serious dramatic work. Pablo Schreiber. Pablo Tel Schreiber was born on April 26, 1978, in an intentional community in Amer, British Columbia, in Canada, to Tel Schreiber, an American actor, and Lorraine Reevely, a Canadian psychotherapist who practiced body-based therapeutic techniques. At only 6 months old, his family relocated to the rural community of Winlaw, British Columbia, where he spent much of his early childhood. His father held a deep love of literature and chose to name his son after the celebrated Chilean poet Pablo Neruda. Schreiber's older paternal half-brother is the well-known actor Liev Schreiber, though the two did not actually meet each other until Pablo was 16 years old, a fact that has often surprised those familiar with both of their careers, given how similar their professional paths eventually became. When Schreiber's parents separated when he was 12, he moved with his father to Seattle, Washington, where he completed his schooling. He initially enrolled at the University of San Francisco with hopes of playing for the school's basketball team, a passion for the sport that had nothing to do with acting at the time, but he eventually transferred to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where he committed himself fully to theatrical training, graduating in 2000 with a degree in theater. His early career was built substantially on the stage, where he performed in numerous Broadway and off-Broadway productions, eventually winning a Tony Award for his work in a revival of Clifford Odets's Awake and Sing. In 2006, a significant achievement that established his credibility as a serious dramatic performer years before he became widely recognized on screen. His first major television breakthrough came when he was cast as Nick Sabotka, a hot-headed Polish-American dock worker, in the acclaimed HBO series The Wire, a role he held across multiple seasons of what is widely regarded as one of the greatest television dramas ever produced. He continued building a steady career across both film and television throughout the 2000s, appearing in supporting roles in films including The Manchurian Candidate alongside his half-brother Liev, Lords of Dogtown, and Woody Allen's Vicky Cristina Barcelona. His most widely recognized role for many years came when he was cast as the menacing corrections officer George, nicknamed Pornstache, Mendez, on the Netflix prison drama Orange is the New Black, a performance that earned him a Primetime Emmy nomination and introduced him to a vastly larger audience than his earlier stage and television work had reached. The years leading up to Skyscraper saw Schreiber's career accelerate considerably. He played the dangerous antagonist William Lewis on Law and Order, Special Victims Unit, and in 2016 he co-starred in the war drama 13 Hours, The Secret Soldiers of Benghazi. In 2017, he was cast as the self-described leprechaun Mad Sweeney on the acclaimed Starz fantasy series American Gods, based on the novel by Neil Gaiman, a role that further showcased his ability to bring physical menace and unexpected vulnerability to morally complicated characters. The year 2018 proved to be an especially busy one for Schreiber, as he appeared in the heist thriller Den of Thieves alongside Gerard Butler, played NASA astronaut Jim Lovell in the celebrated biographical drama First Man, and took on the pivotal role of Ben Gillespie, Will Sawyer's betraying friend, in Skyscraper. In more recent years, Schreiber has continued his rise to leading man status, most notably starring as the iconic Master Chief in the live-action television adaptation of the Halo video game franchise, further proving the remarkable range he has demonstrated since his earliest days on the stages of New York. Hannah Quinlivan. Hannah Quinlivan was born on August 12, 1993, in the Wanhua district of Taipei, Taiwan, to an Australian father of European descent and a mother of Taiwanese and Korean heritage, giving her a multicultural background that has shaped much of her public identity and career throughout the entertainment industries of both Asia and the West. She spent her childhood moving between Taiwan and New South Wales in Australia, growing up fluent across multiple languages and cultural contexts. Her entry into the entertainment world began early, appearing on the Taiwanese variety program Blackie's Teenage Club in 2008 while still a teenager, an experience that introduced her to public life and eventually led to opportunities as a model and television personality. She went on to become a guest host on the program I Love the Man, gradually building her public profile within the competitive Taiwanese entertainment scene. Quinlivan made her formal acting debut in 2012, taking on the role of Pink Kylie in the television series Ti Amo Chocolate, and she continued building her acting credentials over the following years with appearances in productions including Amour et Patisserie and Moon River, eventually landing a lead role in the drama Heart of Steel. To deepen her formal training as a performer, she enrolled in a short, intensive program in film production and acting at the New York Film Academy in 2012, an experience she has spoken about fondly as instrumental in sharpening her craft. Her public profile grew substantially in November 2014 when she confirmed her relationship with the immensely popular Mandopop superstar Jay Chou, who is 14 years her senior. The couple married in a widely publicized ceremony at Selby Abbey in North Yorkshire, England, in January 2015, followed by additional private celebrations in Taipei and Australia, and they have since had 3 children together. Quinlivan's casting in Skyscraper as Xia, the dangerous and highly capable henchwoman working for the film's primary antagonist, represented her first major Hollywood role and introduced her to a global audience far beyond the borders of Taiwanese and Chinese language entertainment. Remarkably, she has spoken openly about the fact that she auditioned for the physically demanding role only days after giving birth to her second child, an indication of the determination and work ethic that has defined her approach to her career even while balancing the demands of motherhood. Following Skyscraper, she continued to build an international filmography, appearing in the disaster epic Skyfire and later starring alongside Bruce Willis in one of the final films of his career. Beyond acting, Quinlivan has built a parallel career as a fashion entrepreneur, launching her own clothing brand and modeling for major international brands, while continuing to balance her creative ambitions with her role as a mother to her 3 children in Taipei. The budget story and behind the scenes of Skyscraper, 2018. The fight for funding and the birth of the Pearl. Before Dwayne Johnson ever leapt from a single crane or scaled a single burning floor, Skyscraper had to survive its own very real battle, the fight to get financed and greenlit in an industry where original action concepts without an existing franchise attached are notoriously difficult to sell. The journey began in May of 2016, when Legendary Entertainment found itself locked in a genuinely fierce bidding war against several other major studios for the rights to a fresh, Chinese set action-adventure screenplay. This was not a small or quiet negotiation. Multiple studios recognized the commercial potential of a large-scale disaster thriller set in the booming Chinese box office market, and Legendary ultimately emerged victorious, securing the project and attaching Dwayne Johnson to star almost immediately. Rawson Marshall Thurber, who had built his reputation primarily as a comedy filmmaker through films like Dodgeball and We're the Millers, came aboard not simply as a director for hire but as the sole credited writer of the screenplay, alongside his role as one of the producers. This made Skyscraper the very first entirely non-comedic project of his entire career, a significant creative leap for a filmmaker who had spent over a decade making audiences laugh rather than grip their armrests in tension. According to Johnson himself, the story behind how Thurber actually pitched him the project has become one of the most charming pieces of Skyscraper trivia to ever surface from behind the scenes. In one of the bonus features later included on the film's home video release, playfully titled The Pineapple Pitch, Johnson revealed that Thurber's pitch for the entire concept of the film involved the pineapple, using the fruit as a visual prop to physically demonstrate the geometry and scale of the building, the fire, and the rescue at the heart of the story. It is the kind of delightfully odd, low-tech storytelling moment that almost never survives into the final cut of a major studio film, and yet it captures exactly the kind of playful creative chemistry that existed between Johnson and Thurber from their very first collaboration onward, having previously worked together on the comedy hit Central Intelligence in 2016. The film's total production budget came to approximately $125 million, a substantial figure that reflects the enormous technical demands of building, both physically and digitally, what was conceived as the tallest skyscraper ever depicted on screen. The financing arrangement saw Legendary Entertainment producing the picture while Universal Pictures handled its theatrical distribution, a partnership that, while successful enough at the time, would later dissolve entirely. In the years following Skyscraper's release, Legendary made the significant business decision to end its distribution relationship with Universal altogether and move its slate of films back over to Warner Brothers, a shift that some industry analysts have linked in part to the underwhelming domestic box office performance of big-budget releases like this one during that period. Building a building that does not exist. One of the most fascinating aspects of how the budget was actually spent involves the genuinely serious architectural work that went into designing the Pearl, the fictional 225-story mega-tall skyscraper at the center of the entire story. Rather than simply inventing an impossible-looking digital structure with no grounding in real-world engineering, the production brought in the actual architectural firm Adrian Smith and Gordon Gill Architecture, a company with real-world experience designing some of the tallest buildings on the planet, to consult on the design. Architect Adrian Smith later explained that the producers specifically wanted a tower based on genuinely real architectural possibilities rather than pure science fiction fantasy, and his firm advised the production team on technical considerations including wind behavior at extreme heights, the natural movement and sway of super tall towers, elevator systems capable of serving over 200 floors, and the broader engineering question of how a structure of this scale could function almost like a self-contained vertical city. The visual design of the building itself drew its inspiration from Chinese cultural symbolism, specifically the image of a coiled dragon holding a pearl in its mouth, a concept that production designer Jim Bissell and his team developed after researching local myths and folklore that could inform the building's distinctive silhouette. A significant portion of the budget went toward the visual effects work required to bring this fictional tower to life, with multiple major effects houses contributing to the finished film, including Moving Picture Company, Method Studios, Image Engine, and the legendary Industrial Light and Magic, the visual effects company originally founded by George Lucas. Coordinating output across 4 separate effects studios for a single film, each handling different sequences and different aspects of the burning tower, required an enormous amount of budget allocated purely toward digital artistry, rendering, and supervision, with a team of visual effects supervisors working to ensure that fire, smoke, structural damage, and the sheer dizzying scale of the building remained visually consistent across every single shot regardless of which studio produced it. Preparing a hero with one leg. A considerable and deeply thoughtful portion of the production's time and resources went into accurately and respectfully portraying Will Sawyer's status as an amputee, a character detail that the filmmakers treated with genuine seriousness rather than simply as a dramatic gimmick. The production brought in Jeff Glassbrenner, a real-life amputee and accomplished motivational speaker who, in 2016, became the first American amputee to successfully summit Mount Everest, to consult directly with Johnson and with the filmmakers from the very earliest stages of development. Glassbrenner's involvement shaped everything from how Sawyer's prosthetic leg functions within the story to how Johnson physically carried himself in scenes meant to convey both vulnerability and remarkable physical capability simultaneously. According to behind-the-scenes interviews included with the film's home release, the decision to make Sawyer's amputee status central to his character, rather than simply incidental, was a deliberate creative choice discussed at length during the film's earliest development meetings, with the production wanting to ensure the portrayal felt grounded and authentic rather than exploitative. The crane jump that became a legend. If there's one single piece of Skyscraper that generated more behind-the-scenes conversation, internet commentary, and good-natured ridicule than anything else, it is the now iconic sequence in which Will Sawyer leaps from the top of a massive construction crane directly into the side of the burning Pearl Tower. The sequence became such a talking point that director Rawson Marshall Thurber found himself repeatedly defending it in interviews following the film's marketing rollout, openly acknowledging that there is, quite simply, no realistic explanation for how Sawyer manages to climb more than 1,400 feet up the side of a crane in what appears to be only a few minutes of screen time. Thurber candidly admitted that he took deliberate cinematic liberty with the sequence specifically because he had no interest in making what he jokingly called a documentary about a guy climbing a crane, reasoning that audiences would have found a realistic depiction of that climb thoroughly boring. His now widely quoted explanation for the sequence's physics-defying speed was refreshingly simple and a little cheeky. He said that Skyscraper was meant to be the richest, biggest cinematic cheeseburger imaginable, and that audiences should simply enjoy the cinematic pepper-jack cheese being added on top, rather than questioning the laws of physics too closely. Producer Hiram Garcia added his own playful contribution to this ongoing conversation, noting in an interview that the production never actually put a stopwatch on Sawyer's climb, but joking that it was nonetheless rather impressive that his character somehow managed to beat the building's own elevator to the top. Thurber's most quoted line on the entire subject, delivered with evident amusement, was simply that audiences should not question The Rock, since The Rock can apparently do anything, a comment that has since taken on a life of its own among fans discussing the film's more outlandish stunt sequences. Behind the literal stunt work of the crane jump and the countless other physically demanding sequences throughout the film lies one of the quieter but more important behind-the-scenes relationships on the entire production, the partnership between Dwayne Johnson and his real-life cousin, the veteran stunt performer Tanoi Reed, who has served as Johnson's stunt double across the majority of his action films for many years. Reed's work on Skyscraper, much of it documented in behind-the-scenes footage released alongside the film, involved an extraordinary amount of harness work, wire rigging, and high-altitude stunt coordination, executed with the kind of practiced, almost familial trust between performer and double that only comes from decades of collaboration between two people who grew up together. Family fights and family stunts. One of the most genuinely heartwarming pieces of behind-the-scenes material to emerge from the production involves the film's youngest cast members, Noah Cottrell and McKenna Roberts, who played Sawyer's twin children Henry and Georgia. Rather than relying entirely on stunt doubles and digital trickery for every single physical moment involving the children, the production made a conscious effort to involve the young actors directly in choreographing and performing portions of their own action sequences. A behind-the-scenes feature titled Kids in Action documented this process, showing the two young performers working directly with the stunt team to learn the physical movements required for their characters to convincingly navigate a building under siege, giving them a genuine sense of ownership over their performances that extended well beyond simply reacting to special effects. Equally memorable from a behind-the-scenes perspective was the emotionally charged confrontation between Dwayne Johnson's character and Pablo Schreiber's character, the pivotal scene in which Sawyer discovers that his trusted friend and former colleague Ben Gillespie has secretly betrayed him. Promotional materials released alongside the film, playfully titled Friends No More, captured the moment Johnson and Schreiber first rehearsed the brutal apartment fight between their two characters, with both actors candidly acknowledging on camera that the moment they stood face to face preparing for the confrontation, they both understood immediately just how physically demanding and emotionally charged the sequence was going to be. The fight required both performers to convey not just physical violence but the genuine emotional devastation of a friendship collapsing in real time, a combination that made the sequence one of the most carefully rehearsed dramatic beats in the entire film despite its brief screen time. The duct tape that became a catchphrase. No discussion of the lighter, more amusing moments connected to Skyscraper would be complete without mentioning the film's now widely quoted line about duct tape. in which Sawyer declares that if you cannot fix something with duct tape, you simply are not using enough of it. The line, delivered with Johnson's signature charisma, became something of an unofficial catchphrase for the character and for the marketing campaign surrounding the film, repeated frequently in interviews, trailers, and promotional appearances. Johnson has spoken in interviews about how naturally that kind of dry, self-aware humor tends to find its way into even his most serious action roles, noting that he and Thurber shared a similar comedic sensibility from their earlier work together that made it easy to sprinkle small moments of levity into even the most tension-filled sequences of a film about a burning skyscraper. Roland Mahler, who played the film's primary antagonist Kors Bota, also spoke warmly in behind-the-scenes interviews about working opposite Johnson for the first time, describing an important lesson he personally took away from watching how Johnson approached his craft and interacted with the cast and crew throughout the demanding shoot. A sentiment echoed by several other cast members who noted that despite the immense physical and technical pressures of filming such a massive production, the atmosphere on set remained consistently warm, collaborative, and good-humored, a tone that Johnson, as both the lead actor and one of the producers, made a deliberate effort to maintain throughout the many months of principal photography in Vancouver. The sound of a burning tower. On the musical side of the production, composer Steve Jablonsky was brought in to score the film, crafting a soundtrack that blended traditional orchestral elements with guitars and synthesized percussion to capture both the human drama and the relentless mechanical scale of the burning tower. The film's end credits also featured an original song titled Walls, performed by British singer and songwriter Jamie N. Commons, adding an emotional coda to a story that, for all its outlandish stunts and gravity-defying action, never lost sight of the very human fear at its center, a family separated by fire and fighting with everything they had to find their way back to each other. Taken together, the story of how Skyscraper was made reveals a production that took its absurd, larger-than-life premise seriously enough to consult real architects, real amputee athletes, and real stunt legends, while never losing the sense of humor and warmth that turned a story about a man fighting a building into one of the most purely entertaining blockbusters of its summer. The cultural and historical details of Skyscraper, 2018. The real-world race to build the sky. To understand why a film like Skyscraper resonated with audiences in the particular cultural moment of 2018, you first have to understand the very real, very competitive history of super-tall building construction that the movie is directly drawing from. For more than a century, cities around the world have engaged in what amounts to an ongoing global competition to construct the tallest building on Earth, a contest that has shifted dramatically in geography over the decades. Through most of the 20th century, that race was dominated almost entirely by American cities, first New York and then Chicago, with structures like the Empire State Building and later the Willis Tower, formerly known as the Sears Tower, standing as the tallest structures on the planet for extended periods. By the early 21st century, however, the center of gravity for super-tall construction had shifted decisively toward the Middle East and East Asia. The completion of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai in 2010, standing at a staggering height of over 2,700 feet across more than 160 floors, redefined what humanity considered architecturally possible and shattered every previous height record by an enormous margin. China, meanwhile, entered an extraordinary multi-decade period of super-tall construction throughout the 2000s and 2010s, building skyscrapers in cities like Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen at a pace and scale that no other nation on Earth could match, driven by explosive urban growth, enormous capital investment, and a genuine sense of national prestige tied to vertical architectural achievement. It is precisely this real-world context, the genuine global fascination with super-tall buildings and the specific association between extreme architectural ambition and East Asian metropolitan centers, that gave Skyscraper's premise its cultural plausibility. The film's fictional tower, the Pearl, at 3,500 feet and 225 stories, was deliberately conceived to exceed even the Burj Khalifa, presenting Hong Kong as the next logical chapter in this real and ongoing global story of architectural one-upmanship. A Hollywood blockbuster built for a Chinese audience. Perhaps the single most important piece of cultural and industry context surrounding Skyscraper has nothing to do with its plot at all, and everything to do with the business circumstances under which it was made. The film was produced by Legendary Entertainment, and at the time of Skyscraper's production, Legendary itself was owned by the Dalian Wanda Group, a massive Chinese conglomerate led by the billionaire businessman Wang Jianlin, who acquired the American studio in a deal valued at $3.5 billion in early 2016. This acquisition was, at the time, the single largest cross-border entertainment purchase ever made by a Chinese company, and it placed a major Hollywood studio capable of producing global blockbusters directly under Chinese corporate ownership for the very first time in the industry's history. This ownership structure explains a great deal about why Skyscraper exists in the specific form that it does. The film's Hong Kong setting, its inclusion of multiple prominent Chinese and Asian characters in significant roles rather than as background figures, and its decision to frame its billionaire property developer as a sympathetic and ultimately heroic figure rather than a villain, all reflect a calculated and deliberate effort by the production to appeal directly and respectfully to Chinese audiences and Chinese regulators alike. This period in Hollywood history, roughly spanning the mid-2010s, saw numerous major American studios actively courting the rapidly growing Chinese box office, which had become, and remains, one of the largest film markets in the entire world, sometimes rivaling or even exceeding the domestic American market in total ticket sales for certain blockbuster releases. Skyscraper's theatrical release strategy reflected this reality directly. The film held its world premiere not in Los Angeles or New York but in Beijing, a clear signal of where the production considered its most important audience to be located. It subsequently secured a release date in China during the month of July, a genuinely unusual achievement at the time, since Chinese regulators have historically restricted the release of major Hollywood films during the summer months in order to protect breathing room for domestic Chinese productions. The fact that Skyscraper was granted this rare exception speaks directly to the influence that Wanda's ownership of Legendary carried within the Chinese film industry and regulatory environment during this period. The film's eventual box office performance bore out this strategy, with the movie's commercial success in China, including a #1 box office debut there, ultimately proving far more significant to its overall financial outcome than its comparatively disappointing performance in the United States. In the years following Skyscraper's release, this entire chapter of Hollywood and Chinese business history took an additional turn, as Legendary Entertainment ultimately ended its distribution partnership with Universal Pictures and moved its operations back toward Warner Brothers, a shift that reflected the broader volatility and shifting alliances that characterized this era of increasingly globalized cross-border entertainment financing. The legacy of Die Hard and the Towering Inferno. Skyscraper exists within a deeply established cinematic lineage, and its connection to that lineage is not incidental or accidental but entirely intentional, openly acknowledged by everyone involved in its production, including Dwayne Johnson himself, who described the film in interviews as his own personal version of Die Hard. The disaster film genre that Skyscraper draws from has a long and culturally significant history stretching back to the 1970s. A decade often referred to by film historians as the golden age of the American disaster movie. The Towering Inferno, released in 1974 and starring Paul Newman and Steve McQueen, stands as the genre's defining skyscraper fire narrative, telling the story of a catastrophic blaze sweeping through a newly constructed high-rise during its opening night gala. That film itself emerged from a cultural moment of genuine anxiety about the safety of the increasingly tall buildings being constructed across American cities, anxiety that was tragically validated by real-world tower fires of the era, including a devastating 1974 fire at the Joelma building in São Paulo, Brazil, which killed nearly 200 people, and which some film historians have connected to the cultural conversation surrounding skyscraper safety that the towering inferno tapped into. Die Hard, released in 1988 and starring Bruce Willis, took a different but equally influential approach to the high-rise setting, transforming the genre from a story about natural or accidental disaster into a story about a lone, resourceful hero single-handedly battling a coordinated group of armed criminals who have seized control of a building, all while evading a slow and often incompetent official response from outside authorities. This template, an ordinary but exceptionally capable protagonist trapped inside a hijacked or burning tower, fighting both the criminals inside and the bureaucratic obstacles outside, became one of the most durable and frequently revisited structures in action cinema. And Skyscraper represents one of the most direct and unapologetic continuations of that exact formula for a new generation of action audiences raised on modern blockbuster filmmaking. The promotional campaign for Skyscraper leaned into this lineage explicitly, with the studio creating deliberate homage posters that visually reference both the towering inferno and Die Hard, openly inviting audiences to draw the connection rather than attempting to obscure it. Representation and the changing face of the action hero. Skyscraper also arrived at a particular cultural moment regarding representation within mainstream action cinema, and several aspects of its casting and characterization reflect broader shifts taking place within Hollywood during this period. The decision to make Will Sawyer an amputee, missing part of his leg as the result of a past trauma, connected the film to a slowly but steadily growing movement within mainstream entertainment to depict characters with disabilities not as figures defined primarily by tragedy or limitation, but as fully capable heroes whose physical difference is acknowledged honestly without becoming the totality of their identity. The production's collaboration with Jeff Glassbrenner, a real amputee and accomplished athlete, reflected a broader industry trend toward consulting directly with people who have lived experience of the conditions being portrayed, rather than relying purely on imagination or stereotype, a practice that has become increasingly expected by audiences and disability advocates alike in the years surrounding the film's release. The film's cast also reflected the increasingly multicultural and multinational character of major Hollywood blockbusters during this era, particularly those aimed at global audiences. The casting of Singaporean actor Chin Han, Hong Kong-born actor Byron Mann, and Taiwanese-Australian actress Hannah Quinlivan in significant roles, rather than relegating Asian characters purely to background or stereotypical positions, reflected the commercial reality that Hollywood studios increasingly needed to court Asian audiences directly and authentically if they wanted their films to succeed at the now enormous Chinese and broader Asian box office. This period saw numerous American blockbusters making similar casting and narrative choices, an industry-wide pattern of adaptation driven as much by commercial necessity as by any pure artistic impulse toward greater representation, though the practical effect, intentional or otherwise, was a gradual broadening of who got to appear as capable, three-dimensional characters in major studio action films. A post-9/11 and post-Grenfell cultural backdrop. It is also worth considering Skyscraper within the broader cultural context of how Western and global audiences have related to the image of the burning skyscraper in the decades following the September 11 terrorist attacks of 2001. The collapse of the World Trade Center towers in New York fundamentally altered the cultural weight carried by any depiction of a tall building under attack or engulfed in flames, and Hollywood disaster films, made in the decades since, have had to navigate this charged symbolic terrain carefully, often by deliberately setting their stories overseas, by emphasizing accidental or criminal rather than explicitly terroristic motivations, or by focusing tightly on personal family stakes rather than broader geopolitical messaging, all strategies that Skyscraper employs to keep its story feeling like an entertaining thrill ride rather than an uncomfortable echo of real-world tragedy. The film's release also came remarkably close in time to a genuinely tragic real-world high-rise fire, the Grenfell Tower disaster in London in June of 2017. In which a fire spread rapidly through a residential tower block, killing 72 people in one of the deadliest structural fires in recent British history. That catastrophe sparked intense public conversation across the world regarding fire safety standards, building cladding materials, and the adequacy of fire suppression and evacuation systems in modern high-rise residential towers, precisely the kind of systems that Skyscraper's plot revolves around when Botha's mercenaries deliberately sabotage the Pearl's advanced fire suppression network. While Skyscraper was already deep into production by the time the Grenfell tragedy occurred and was certainly not created in direct response to it, the film's release in the summer of 2018 nonetheless landed in a cultural environment where audiences were arguably more attuned than usual to questions about the genuine safety of the super-tall buildings increasingly dominating skylines around the world. The enduring fascination with height and vulnerability. At its core, Skyscraper taps into something psychologically and culturally very old and very universal, the particular kind of vertiginous fear that comes from being placed at an extreme height with no easy way down, combined with the deep, almost primal anxiety of being trapped and separated from one's family during a moment of mortal danger. This combination of physical vertigo and emotional separation anxiety has proven to be one of the most reliably effective engines for popular entertainment across multiple decades and multiple cultural contexts, from the original disaster films of the 1970s through to contemporary blockbusters like Skyscraper. The film's massive commercial success in markets across Asia, even as it underperformed somewhat in North America, suggests that this particular combination of fears and desires, the longing to protect one's family against impossible odds set against a backdrop of dazzling, gravity-defying modern engineering, continues to resonate powerfully with audiences across very different cultural contexts around the globe, reaffirming the disaster movie's status as one of the most durable and universally legible genres in the entire history of popular cinema.